The machines were beeping. That steady, mechanical rhythm that tells you someone's about to die. I was holding my father's hand. George Reeve, the man who raised me, taught me everything I knew about fixing things that were broken. His fingers were cold, trembling, and I could feel him slipping away with every labored breath. But then he said something that shattered my entire world. "You're not my son, Daniel." I thought I'd misheard him. The morphine, maybe. But his eyes were crystal clear, boring into mine with an intensity I'd never seen before. "You were an investment. $10,000 a month." My blood turned to ice. The room started spinning. What the hell was he talking about? He gripped my hand tighter, his voice barely a whisper now. "When you find out who bought your childhood, run." Those were the last words George Reeve ever spoke to me. And they destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. Before I tell you what those words did to me, what they led me to discover, what they cost me, like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Because what I'm about to tell you, it's going to change how you think about family, about truth, about the lies we tell ourselves just to survive. Let me take you back to before that hospital room. Before everything fell apart. Back when I was just Daniel Reeve, 36 years old, a mechanical engineer living in a quiet mountain town in Colorado. Life was simple then. Predictable. Safe. I had what I thought was the perfect childhood. George and Helen Reeve, my parents, owned a small repair shop on Main Street. We fixed everything: old radios, broken lawnmowers, antique clocks that hadn't ticked in decades. My earliest memories are of standing on a wooden crate next to my dad's workbench, watching his weathered hands coax life back into broken things. Sunday barbecues in our backyard. My mother Helen humming while she hung laundry on the line. The smell of motor oil and fresh baked bread. Simple pleasures. Real love. Or so I thought. But looking back now, there were signs. Little things that never quite made sense. Phone calls that would make my dad leave the room, his voice dropping to a whisper. Envelopes that arrived monthly, always marked, private transfer. Dad would stuff them in his pocket before I could see who they were from. I remember asking him once, when I was maybe 12, why we got so much mail from banks. He just ruffled my hair and said, "Don't worry about grown-up stuff, son. That's my job." There were the trips too. Every few months, Dad would drive to Denver for parts, but he'd be gone for 3 days, and he never brought any parts back. When he returned, he'd be quiet for weeks, distant. Mom would hover around him like she was afraid he might disappear. But I was a kid. Kids don't question the world their parents build for them. I trusted them completely. God, how naive I was. The unease started small. A feeling in my gut that something wasn't quite right. But I pushed it down, buried it under layers of gratitude and love. These people had given me everything. Who was I to question their methods? I should have asked more questions. I should have pushed harder. Maybe then I wouldn't have been blindsided by the truth. George died on a Tuesday. We buried him on Friday. By Saturday, my entire world was crumbling. I went to the house to help my mother sort through his things, and that's when I found them. Foreclosure notices. Stacks of them, dating back months. The house I grew up in, the shop where I learned to work with my hands, all of it was about to be taken away. "Mom," I said, holding up the papers with shaking hands. "What is this? Why didn't you tell me?" Helen looked at me with eyes so hollow, so broken, that I barely recognized her. "Your father, he made me promise not to tell you. He said it would all work out. But it got worse. So much worse." The bank records were gone. Erased. Like 30 years of deposits and withdrawals had never happened. The savings account that was supposed to have enough for their retirement? Empty. Cleaned out. I called the bank, demanded answers. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reeve," the manager told me. "Those records are protected by client confidentiality. I can't discuss the details." Client confidentiality. I'm his son. "According to our records, sir, you're not listed as a beneficiary on any of these accounts." Not listed as a beneficiary. On my own father's accounts. What the hell did that even mean? 2 nights after the funeral, I got the call. 3 in the morning, my phone buzzing me awake. "Daniel?" Helen's voice, choked with tears. "The shop, it's gone." I drove there as fast as I could, but by the time I arrived, there was nothing left but ash and twisted metal. 30 years of memories, tools that had been passed down through generations, the workbench where my father taught me everything I knew, all of it reduced to smoke and rubble. The fire marshal said it was electrical. Old building, old wiring. These things happen. But I knew better. You don't spend your life around machinery without learning to spot when something's been tampered with. The burn patterns were wrong. Too clean. Too thorough. Someone had torched my father's workshop. But why? The next morning, I went back to the house to pack up Helen's things. She was moving to her sister's place in Phoenix. She couldn't afford to stay, couldn't afford anything anymore. That's when I found it. Hidden in the pocket of my father's old work overalls, the ones he'd worn every day for 20 years, was a small brass key. And written on a piece of masking tape stuck to it, Mile 43. I stared at that key for a long time, turning it over in my hands. Mile 43. What the hell was at Mile 43? When I looked up, Helen was standing in the doorway, watching me with an expression I'd never seen before. Fear. Pure, undiluted fear. "Mom, what is this?" She started crying then. Deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere dark and hollow inside her. "I can't," she whispered. "I promised him I'd never tell you. But Daniel, you need to know. You need to find out who you really are." "What are you talking about?" "I know who I am. I'm your son." She shook her head, backing away from me like I was dangerous. "No," she said. "You're not. And it's not safe for either of us anymore. Find the truth, Daniel. But when you do, don't try to find me." The next morning, she was gone. No forwarding address. No goodbye. Just a note on the kitchen table: "It's not safe for either of us. Find the truth." I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. And all I had was a brass key and 2 words, Mile 43. Mile marker 43 was on the old highway, about 20 minutes outside town. I'd driven past it 1,000 times and never given it a second thought. But there, hidden behind a cluster of pine trees, was a storage facility I'd never noticed before. The key fit perfectly into Unit 247. Inside was a single item, an old safe, the kind you'd find in a 1950s bank. It took me 3 hours and a crowbar to get it open, but when I did, my hand started shaking so hard I could barely hold the papers inside. Burned documents. Most of them too damaged to read. But I could make out fragments. Bank receipts from Switzerland. Dates going back to 1991. And my name, Daniel Reeve, written in careful script at the top of what looked like a contract. The contract was mostly illegible, fire damaged beyond repair. But I could make out a few crucial lines. Monthly compensation, $10,000. Subject to confidentiality and protection clause. Termination clause, upon subject reaching age of majority or breach of agreement. $10,000. Every month. For what? For whom? My hands were shaking as I dug deeper into the safe. More papers, more fragments. And then I found it, a business card, pristine and untouched by the fire. Lyon Private Banking. Marcus Lyon, Senior Account Manager. I called the number immediately. Mr. Reeve, the voice on the other end was smooth, professional. I've been expecting your call. You have? Your father's passing was noted. I believe we need to meet. We arranged to meet at a diner outside town. Lyon was exactly what you'd expect from a Swiss banker, impeccably dressed, precise movements, eyes that revealed nothing. He slid into the booth across from me like he owned the place. I've been managing your account for 26 years, he said without preamble. My account? What account? I don't have any account with your bank. He smiled then, and something cold crawled up my spine. Not your account, Mr. Reeve. The account established for your maintenance. Maintenance? What the hell does that mean? Your parents received $10,000 every month from 1991 until your 18th birthday. The payments resumed when you graduated college and have continued until now. I felt like I was drowning. Payments for what? I'm not authorized to discuss the details. I was simply the conduit. A private foundation wished to ensure your well-being. Your parents were compensated for their efforts. Compensated? You're talking about my childhood like it was a business transaction. Lyon's expression didn't change. Wasn't it? I wanted to hit him. I wanted to grab him by his perfect tie and shake him until he told me everything. But he stood up before I could move. The payments have stopped now, Mr. Reeve. Your father's death terminated the contract. I thought you should know. Wait. Who was paying? What foundation? What contract? But he was already walking away. I'm sorry, Mr. Reeve. That's all I'm authorized to tell you. I followed him outside, but his car was already gone. Vanished like he'd never been there at all. The next morning, I drove back to the diner, then to the address on his business card. The building was empty. For lease signs in the windows. Like Lyon Private Banking had never existed. But I had the papers. I had proof. Someone had been paying for my childhood, and George and Helen had been lying to me my entire life. The question was, who? And why? I spent the next 3 weeks trying to track down Lyon, trying to make sense of the fragments I'd found in that safe. I hired a private investigator, a guy named Morrison who charged me $500 to tell me that Lyon Private Banking was a shell company that had been dissolved 2 days after I met with him. Whoever you're dealing with, Morrison told me, they don't want to be found. I was starting to think I'd never get answers when she approached me. I was sitting in my truck outside the burned remains of my father's shop, just staring at the rubble and trying to figure out what to do next, when someone tapped on my window. She was maybe 40, with short blonde hair and intense green eyes. Professional, but not corporate. More like military. Daniel Reeve? I nodded, wary. My name is Layla Croft. I'm a private investigator. I think we need to talk. Something about her voice, her stance, told me she wasn't going to disappear like Lyon had. This woman had answers. We went to a coffee shop downtown, one of those places with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. She ordered black coffee and spread a manila folder across the table between us. What I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear, she said. Lady, my entire life just went up in smoke. Try me. She opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. A newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. The headline read, "London family devastated by missing child." The photo showed a man and woman, both well-dressed, both staring at the camera with the hollow eyes of parents who've lost everything. Between them was a smaller photo, a 2-year-old boy with dark hair and blue eyes. I stared at that photo for a long time before I realized why it made my stomach turn. The boy looked exactly like me. "This is from 1991, Layla said. A child named Elias Varick went missing from his home in London. He was never found." My mouth was dry. What does this have to do with me? She pulled out another paper. A DNA analysis report. "I had some of your hair analyzed. Hair from a brush I found in your burned-out house. The results came back yesterday." She slid the paper across to me. The technical jargon was mostly incomprehensible, but the conclusion was clear. 99.7% probability of biological relationship to Evelyn Varick. 99.4% probability of biological relationship to Marcus Varick. "Daniel," Layla said quietly, "your name isn't Daniel Reeve. It's Elias Varick. And your parents, your real parents, have been looking for you for 34 years. The room started spinning. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. "That's impossible. I was adopted. George and Helen told me I was adopted when I was a baby." "You were adopted. But not legally. You were stolen." She pulled out more papers. Birth certificates. Missing person reports. Hospital records. Elias Varick disappeared from his family's estate in London on March 15, 1991. 3 months later, a couple named George and Helen Reeve applied for a late birth certificate for their son, Daniel, in Colorado. They claimed he'd been born at home. I couldn't breathe. The coffee shop felt like it was closing in around me. This is insane. Why would someone steal a child and then pay the kidnappers to raise him? Layla's expression darkened. "Because whoever took you wasn't interested in ransom money. They were buying silence. Your biological parents, Marcus and Evelyn Varick, own one of the largest biomedical companies in Europe. Varick Pharmaceuticals. They're worth billions." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Someone wanted you gone, Daniel. But they also wanted you alive. The question is, why?" I thought about my father's dying words. "When you find out who bought your childhood, run." Run from who? That's what we need to figure out. "But Daniel, there's something else." She hesitated, like she was afraid to tell me. "What?" "The company that paid for your upkeep all these years. It's called Meridian Holdings. And Meridian Holdings is owned by Adrian Varick. Marcus Varick's brother." The world tilted sideways. My uncle had been paying to keep me hidden. My own family had been funding my disappearance. I don't understand. Why would my uncle want me gone? Why would he pay to keep me away from my parents? Layla gathered up the papers, her movements sharp and efficient. "That's what we're going to find out. But first, there's someone you need to meet." "Who?" "Your mother. Your real mother. Evelyn Varick. She's been waiting 34 years to see you again. The flight to London was the longest 8 hours of my life. Layla had arranged everything, passports, visas, even police escort. Apparently, when you're the missing heir to a pharmaceutical empire, people move fast. But I couldn't stop thinking about George and Helen. Had they known I was stolen? Had they been part of the kidnapping, or were they just desperate people who got in over their heads? The $10,000 a month made more sense now. It wasn't payment for raising me, it was payment for keeping quiet. Hush money. Blood money. Daniel, Layla said as our plane began its descent into Heathrow. I need you to prepare yourself for what's coming. Your mother, she never stopped looking for you. This is going to be overwhelming for both of you. I stared out the window at the London skyline, trying to imagine the woman who'd given birth to me. Trying to picture a life I'd never lived, a family I'd never known. What about my father? Marcus? Layla's expression shifted. He's complicated. The investigation damaged him. He became obsessed with finding you, but also paranoid. He doesn't trust easily anymore. Does he know I'm coming? He knows. But Daniel, there's something about Marcus you need to understand. The missing child case nearly destroyed his company. There were rumors, accusations. Some people thought he'd staged your disappearance for publicity, others thought he was involved in something worse. He spent 30 years rebuilding his reputation. And now I'm going to destroy it all over again. Maybe. Or maybe you're going to give him back the only thing that ever really mattered to him. The car that picked us up at the airport was the kind of vehicle I'd only seen in movies. Black, bulletproof, windows so dark you couldn't see inside. We drove through London in silence, past landmarks I recognized from postcards but had never seen in person. The Varick estate was an hour outside the city, hidden behind tall stone walls and gates that looked like they belonged on a fortress. As we drove up the winding driveway, I caught glimpses of the house through the trees, massive, ancient, the kind of place where kings used to live. Jesus, I muttered. Your family has money, Daniel. Serious money. This is going to be an adjustment. The car stopped in front of a main entrance that looked like something from a cathedral. Stone steps led up to heavy wooden doors that must have been 10 feet tall. I felt like I was walking into a museum. But then the doors opened, and everything else faded away. She was smaller than I'd expected. Older, obviously, 34 years had passed, but there was something about her face, her eyes, that felt familiar in a way that made my chest tight. Evelyn Varick stood in the doorway, her hands pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Elias, she whispered. And then she was running toward me, and I was running toward her, and when she threw her arms around me, I understood for the first time in my life what it meant to come home. She smelled like lavender and old books. Her hands shook as she touched my face, like she was afraid I might disappear again. My boy, she kept saying. My beautiful boy. I knew you'd come back to me. I knew it. We stood there in the driveway for I don't know how long, holding each other while she cried, and I tried to process the fact that this stranger was my mother. My real mother. When we finally broke apart, I saw him watching from the doorway. Marcus Varick was exactly what I'd expected, tall, distinguished, silver-haired. But there was something in his eyes, something guarded and suspicious, that made me step back. He didn't run to embrace me. He didn't cry. He just stood there, studying me like I was a problem to be solved. Hello, Elias, he said finally. It's Daniel, I said. My name is Daniel. Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, maybe. Or anger. Of course. Daniel. Evelyn was still clinging to my arm, like she was afraid I might bolt. Come inside, she said. We have so much to talk about. So much time to make up for. The inside of the house was even more overwhelming than the outside. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, paintings that probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. I felt like I was trespassing. But it was the photographs that stopped me cold. They were everywhere. Hundreds of them, covering every surface, lining the walls. Pictures of a little boy at every age from 2 to 36. School photos, graduation pictures, birthday parties I'd never attended. How do you have these? I asked. Evelyn's smile was sad. I hired investigators. They watched you grow up from a distance. I have pictures of your first day of school, your high school graduation, your wedding. I've never been married. Your almost wedding, then. To Sarah Mitchell. June 2018. You called it off 3 days before the ceremony. I stared at her. How could you possibly know that? Because I never stopped watching. Never stopped hoping. I have investigators monitoring you right now. I know about your father's death, about the fire, about the safe. I know everything, Daniel. The room felt like it was closing in. These people had been watching me my entire life. Documenting my existence from the shadows. You've been spying on me. We've been protecting you, Marcus said, speaking for the first time since we'd entered the house. His voice was cold, controlled. Do you have any idea how many attempts there have been on your life over the years? Attempts? What are you talking about? Evelyn and Marcus exchanged a look that told me there was a lot more to this story. Sir, Layla said, stepping forward. Maybe we should start from the beginning. Marcus moved to a bar cart in the corner and poured himself a scotch. He didn't offer me one. The beginning, he said, is that my brother Adrian wanted you dead. And when that proved problematic, he settled for making you disappear. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Your brother tried to kill me. I was 2 years old. You were the heir to a billion-dollar company. Adrian stood to inherit everything if you were out of the picture. Marcus took a long sip of his scotch, studying me over the rim of his glass. But Adrian made a mistake. Instead of having you killed, he hired people to take you away. People who got greedy. George and Helen Reeve were supposed to dispose of you. Instead, they decided to raise you and collect payment from Adrian for keeping quiet about it. The room was spinning. Everything I thought I knew about George and Helen, about my childhood, about myself, it was all a lie. So my adoptive parents were kidnappers. And murderers. They were supposed to be murderers, Evelyn said softly. But they couldn't do it. They looked at this beautiful little boy and they couldn't hurt you. So they kept you instead. And Adrian just went along with it. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Adrian thought you were dead. George and Helen sent him photographs, staged photos of a child's grave, fake death certificates. He believed he'd won. Meanwhile, they were collecting $10,000 a month to keep you hidden and alive. I sank into one of the massive leather chairs, my head in my hands. This is insane. This is completely insane. It gets worse, Layla said. I looked up at her. How could it possibly get worse? She pulled out another folder, this one thicker than the others. Because Adrian found out you were alive 3 months ago. That's why the payment stopped. That's why your father's shop burned down. That's why Helen disappeared. The blood drained from my face. He knows I'm alive. He's known for months. And he's been cleaning up loose ends. I thought about my father's dying words, when you find out who bought your childhood, run. He wasn't just telling me to run from the truth, I said slowly. He was warning me to run from Adrian. Marcus nodded grimly. Your father may have been a kidnapper, but in the end, he tried to protect you. I stood up, pacing to the window. Outside, I could see security guards patrolling the grounds. Men with earpieces and guns. So what happens now? I hide here for the rest of my life. No, Marcus said. Now we finish this. I turned back to face him. What do you mean? I mean Adrian has been stealing from my company for 34 years. Using resources, funds, connections, all to cover up what he did to you. It's time he paid for it. There was something in his voice, something cold and calculating, that made me uncomfortable. You want revenge. I want justice. There's a difference. But as I looked at him standing there, swirling his scotch and staring at me with those calculating eyes, I wondered if there really was a difference at all. And I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to this story. More secrets. More lies. Marcus Varick had gotten his son back. But I was starting to suspect that wasn't the only thing he wanted. That first night in London, I couldn't sleep. The bed was bigger than my entire bedroom back home, and the silence was deafening. No traffic, no neighbors, just the sound of my own breathing in a house that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up trying to sleep and went exploring. The house was like a maze, endless hallways lined with portraits of people I didn't recognize, rooms filled with furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. I found myself in what appeared to be a study. Dark wood, leather-bound books, the smell of old paper and expensive cigars. And there, on the massive desk, was a photograph I hadn't seen before. It was Marcus, but younger. Maybe in his 30s. He was wearing work clothes, standing in front of what looked like a laboratory or factory. And next to him, wearing the same clothes and smiling at the camera, was George Reeve. My hands started shaking as I picked up the photograph. On the back, in faded ink, M. Varick and G. Reeve, Denver Facility, 1987. 4 years before I was kidnapped. You found it. I spun around. Marcus was standing in the doorway, fully dressed despite the early hour. This is my father, I said, holding up the photograph. He worked for you. Marcus stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. George was one of my best engineers. We were developing a new class of medical devices. He was brilliant. But he kidnapped your son. Did he? The question hung in the air between us like smoke. I set the photograph down carefully, my mind racing. What are you saying? Marcus moved to the bar cart and poured 2 glasses of scotch, even though it was 3 in the morning. He handed one to me. I'm saying that sometimes the truth is more complicated than it appears. I didn't drink the scotch. I just stared at him, waiting. George didn't kidnap you, Daniel. I gave you to him. The glass slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor. What? Adrian wasn't the only one who wanted you gone. I did too. The room tilted. Everything I'd learned, everything I thought I understood, crumbled around me. Why? Why would you want your own son gone? Marcus sat down heavily in one of the leather chairs. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked old. Tired. Because you weren't just my son. You were my backup plan. I don't understand. My real son, my biological son, was dying. Congenital heart defect. The doctors said he had maybe 6 months to live. But you were genetically identical. A perfect match. The words hit me like physical blows. You cloned me. Not cloned. Designed. We used advanced genetic engineering techniques to create a child who would be biologically compatible with my dying son. A living donor. I felt sick. You created me to be spare parts. I created you to save my child's life. But when the time came, I couldn't do it. I couldn't sacrifice one son to save another. So you gave me away. I gave you to George and Helen because I knew they would love you. I knew they would raise you as their own. And I paid them to keep you safe, to keep you hidden, so that no one would ever ask questions about where you came from. I stared at him, this stranger who was my father, this man who had created me in a laboratory like an experiment. What happened to your real son? He died 6 months later. Just like the doctors predicted. The pain in his voice was real. Raw. But it didn't change what he'd done. So I was never really missing. I was never kidnapped. You just gave me away. I gave you a life. A real life, with people who would love you unconditionally. Do you think that was easy for me? Do you think I didn't watch you every day, wondering if I'd made the right choice? Then why bring me back now? Why the elaborate story about Adrian and kidnapping Anne? Because Adrian found out. About the genetic engineering, about you, about everything. He was going to expose it all, destroy the company, destroy our family's reputation. Unless what? Marcus met my eyes, and I saw the truth there before he spoke it. Unless I gave him what he'd wanted all along. Control of the company. And the only way to do that was to eliminate the heir. The Scotch smell was making me nauseous. Or maybe it was the realization that I was still just a pawn in their game. You brought me back to kill me. I brought you back to save you. Adrian thinks you're coming home to claim your inheritance. He's planning to eliminate you before that can happen. But I'm going to eliminate him first. And then what? I become the heir to a company built on lies and genetic experimentation. You become the son I always wanted but never deserved. I stood up, backing away from him. I need to get out of here. Where will you go? Back to Colorado? There's nothing left for you there. Adrian made sure of that. I'll figure it out. Daniel, please. You're my son. Blood or no blood, laboratory or no laboratory, you're my boy. Let me protect you. But I was already moving toward the door. I'm not your son. I'm not anyone's son. I'm just a science experiment that got out of hand. That's not true. I stopped at the door, my hand on the handle. Isn't it? You created me in a lab to be spare parts for another child. When that didn't work out, you gave me away like an unwanted pet. And now you've brought me back because you need me again. Tell me, Marcus, when have I ever been anything more than a tool to you? He didn't answer. Couldn't answer. I walked out of that study, out of that house, out of the life I'd never really been meant to have. But I wasn't running away anymore. I was running toward something. The truth. All of it. Even if it destroyed me. I took a taxi back to London and checked into a hotel under a fake name Layla had given me. I needed time to think, to process everything Marcus had told me. But more than that, I needed to figure out what to do next. The truth was worse than I'd imagined. I wasn't just a kidnapped child or even a stolen heir. I was a genetic experiment. A designer baby created to be someone else's salvation. And now two men, my biological father and his brother, were fighting over me like I was a piece of property. I was staring out my hotel window at the London traffic when someone knocked on my door. Room service, a voice called. I hadn't ordered room service. I grabbed the lamp from the bedside table and approached the door cautiously. I didn't order anything. Courtesy of the house, sir. Something about the voice made my skin crawl. I looked through the peephole but couldn't see anyone. That's when I heard the lock clicking. I had maybe 3 seconds before the door opened. I dove behind the bed just as two men in dark suits entered the room, guns drawn. He's not here, one of them said. Check the bathroom. I heard footsteps moving around the room. My phone was on the nightstand, too far away to reach without being seen. The window was 30 stories up, not exactly an escape route. That's when my phone rang. The footsteps stopped. Found it. I heard one of them answer my phone. Daniel? Daniel, where are you? It was Evelyn's voice, frantic. "He's not here, ma'am." But he was. "Who is this? Where's my son?" "Your son is going to be fine, Mrs. Varick. As long as certain agreements are honored." There was silence on the line. Then, Adrian. "Hello, sister-in-law." I pressed myself flatter against the floor, my heart hammering so hard I was sure they could hear it. "What do you want, Adrian?" "The same thing I've wanted for 34 years. What's rightfully mine?" "Daniel is not yours. He never was." "I'm not talking about the boy. I'm talking about the company." "My company? It was never your company." "It should have been. I was the older brother. I was the one with the vision. But Marcus got everything because he married the right woman and produced the right heir. Daniel has nothing to do with this. Daniel is everything to do with this. As long as he's alive, he's a threat to my claim. Marcus made sure of that when he put him in his will." "What will?" "Daniel was missing. He was presumed dead." Adrian laughed, and the sound made my blood freeze. "Oh, dear Evelyn. You really don't know, do you? Marcus never presumed the boy was dead. He knew exactly where he was the entire time. And he's been planning for this day ever since." "That's impossible." "Is it? Who do you think has been funding the boy's life all these years? Who do you think arranged for those monthly payments?" "Marcus, of course. He was preparing his heir, making sure the boy would be grateful enough to do whatever Daddy asked when the time came." I could hear Evelyn breathing heavily on the phone. "You're lying." "Am I? Ask yourself this, why would Marcus suddenly decide to bring the boy home now? After 34 years of hiding? Because he's dying, Evelyn. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. He has maybe 6 months left." My world tilted again. Marcus was dying. And when he dies, Adrian continued, everything goes to his beloved son. Unless, of course, something happens to dear Daniel first. I won't let you hurt him. You won't have a choice. The boy is already gone, and my people will find him soon enough. Unless. Unless what? Unless Marcus signs over control of the company to me. Tonight. Full ownership, full control. In exchange, the boy lives. Marcus will never. Marcus will do whatever it takes to protect his investment. He's been grooming that boy for 34 years. He's not going to let me kill him now. The line went dead. I lay on that hotel room floor, listening to the footsteps above me, and tried to process what I just heard. Marcus was dying. He'd known where I was my entire life. And he'd been planning to use me as his heir all along. George and Helen hadn't been kidnappers. They'd been caretakers. Paid to raise me, to love me, to prepare me for this moment. My entire life had been orchestrated. Every choice, every moment, every relationship, all of it designed to lead me back here, to this moment, to this choice. And now Adrian wanted to kill me to get to Marcus. The footsteps moved toward the door. "He'll be back," one of the men said. "We'll wait." I heard the door close, but I knew they were still out there. Watching. Waiting. I was trapped in a hotel room 30 stories above London, hunted by killers, with nowhere to run and no one to trust. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't confused anymore. I knew exactly what I had to do. I waited until midnight, then climbed out onto the ledge. I know how that sounds. 30 stories up, in the dark, with armed men in the hallway. But growing up in Colorado, working on roofs and radio towers with my father, had given me a pretty good head for heights. And more importantly, it was the one way out they wouldn't expect. The ledge was maybe 6 inches wide, barely enough room for my feet. The wind was howling, trying to peel me off the building like old paint. But 3 windows over, there was a balcony. It took me 20 minutes to inch my way across that ledge, my fingers bleeding from gripping the stone, my legs shaking from fear and cold. But I made it. The balcony belonged to a corner suite. Through the windows, I could see it was empty. I used my belt buckle to crack the glass just enough to reach the latch, then slipped inside. I needed to get to Marcus. Not to reconcile, not to forgive him, but to end this once and for all. The hotel phone worked. I called the Varick estate. Daniel? Evelyn's voice was breathless with relief. Oh God, where are you? Are you safe? For now. Is Marcus there? Yes, but Daniel, Adrian's people are everywhere. They're watching the house, the roads. I need to talk to him. Daniel, please. Just run. Get away from here. We have money, resources. We can hide you somewhere safe. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of being everyone's pawn. You're not a pawn. You're our son. Am I? Or am I just Marcus's backup plan? His insurance policy? Silence on the line. That told me everything I needed to know. Put him on the phone. More silence. Then Marcus's voice, weaker than I remembered. Daniel. I know about the cancer. Adrian told you. Adrian's men were in my hotel room. I heard everything. Where are you now? Somewhere safe. For the moment. Good. Stay there. I'm going to fix this. How? By giving Adrian the company. If that's what it takes. And then what happens to me? Adrian kills me anyway, and you die knowing you gave everything away for nothing. At least you'll be alive. I almost laughed. Will I? What kind of life is that, Marcus? Always running, always hiding, always looking over my shoulder. That's not living. That's existing. It's better than being dead. Is it? I thought about George and Helen, about the simple life they'd built for me in Colorado. It had been based on lies, but the love had been real. The happiness had been real. I want to make a deal with you, I said. What kind of deal? I come home. I face Adrian. I end this. Absolutely not. In exchange, you tell me everything. All of it. No more lies, no more secrets. I want to know exactly who I am, how I was made, why you chose George and Helen, everything. Daniel, you don't understand what you're asking. And I want you to set up a foundation. Use the money you've been paying to keep me hidden all these years. Use it to help other kids who've been lost, stolen, abandoned. Kids like me. Marcus was quiet for a long time. That's all you want? A foundation? It's more than I've ever had. A purpose. A reason to exist beyond being your spare part or Adrian's obstacle. And if Adrian kills you? Then at least I'll die as myself. Not as someone else's experiment. Another long silence. Then, come home, son. The drive back to the estate took an hour. Layla met me at the gates with a police escort. Apparently, when you're a billionaire's heir, law enforcement becomes very interested in your welfare. But as we drove up that long driveway, I could see cars I didn't recognize. Black sedans with tinted windows. Adrian's people. He's here, Layla said. Good. Daniel, this is insane. We should turn around. Call for backup. No more running. The house looked different at night. Bigger. More menacing. Light spilled from every window, but somehow it felt darker than before. Marcus and Evelyn were waiting in the main hall. Marcus looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile. The cancer was already eating away at him. But it was the man standing beside them who commanded attention. Adrian Varick was everything Marcus wasn't. Younger, stronger, with the kind of presence that filled a room. He was smiling as I walked in, like we were old friends meeting for dinner. "Elias," he said. "Or do you prefer Daniel? I've heard so much about you." "I prefer alive." He laughed. Straight to the point. "I like that. You get that from your father." "Which one?" "Touché." Adrian moved to the bar cart, perfectly at ease. "Drink?" "I don't drink with people who are trying to kill me." "Kill you? Who said anything about killing you? I just want what's rightfully mine." "The company. The company. The estate. The legacy that should have been mine from the beginning." He poured himself a scotch, the same way Marcus had the night before. Everything about him was calculated to remind us that he was Marcus's brother, that he had just as much right to be here. "But I'm willing to negotiate," he continued. "Marcus and I have come to an understanding." I looked at Marcus. His face was gray, defeated. "What kind of understanding?" Marcus cleared his throat. "I'm transferring control of Varick Pharmaceuticals to Adrian. Effective immediately." "In exchange for what?" "Your life," Adrian said simply. "And a comfortable retirement for your parents here." "And what about me? What's my role in this understanding?" Adrian smiled, and something cold crawled up my spine. "You disappear. Again. New identity, new life, far away from here. We'll even throw in a generous settlement. Enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. And if I refuse? Then this conversation becomes much more unpleasant." I looked around the room. Marcus, defeated and dying. Evelyn, crying silently. Adrian, confident and in control. And me, the genetic experiment at the center of it all. "I have a counteroffer," I said. Adrian raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "I'll disappear. New identity, new life, just like you want. But first, you're going to tell me everything. About the genetic engineering, about how I was made, about why you really want me gone." "Why would you care about any of that?" "Because I've been lied to my entire life. I think I deserve the truth before I disappear forever." Adrian looked at Marcus, then back at me. "Fine. But then you're gone. No coming back, no claiming inheritance, no contact with your parents. You cease to exist. Deal." He set down his drink and walked to the fireplace, studying the flames. "You want the truth? Here's the truth. You're not just genetically engineered. You're genetically perfect. Every strand of DNA was designed, selected, optimized. You're stronger, smarter, healthier than any natural human could be." I felt sick. Why? Because Marcus wanted to create the perfect heir. Someone who could run his company better than he ever could. Someone who could push human genetics forward into the next century. So why get rid of me? Adrian turned back to face me. Because perfection is terrifying. Do you have any idea what the world would do if they found out we could create designer humans? The regulations, the restrictions, the complete shutdown of our research. So you've been protecting the company by hiding me. I've been protecting humanity by hiding you. The words hit me like a physical blow. Protecting humanity from me? You're not human, Daniel. Not really. You're something new. Something better. And something that dangerous can't be allowed to exist. I stared at him, this man who saw me as a threat to the entire human race. But I am human. I think, I feel, I love. You think you do. But how can you be sure? How can any of us be sure what you really are? Marcus spoke for the first time since I'd entered the room. He's my son. That's what he is. Your son died 34 years ago, Adrian said coldly. This thing is just wearing his face. I felt something break inside me. Not just anger, but something deeper. Something that had been building for weeks, ever since George's dying words. You're wrong, I said quietly. Am I? Yeah. You are. Because human or not, natural or designed, I'm still capable of one very human emotion. Which is rage. I moved faster than I'd ever moved in my life. All those enhanced genetics, all that careful design, finally serving a purpose. Adrian never saw me coming. The fight lasted maybe 30 seconds. Adrian was bigger, stronger, but he was also overconfident. He thought he was dealing with a lost, confused young man. He wasn't ready for what 34 years of suppressed anger could do. When it was over, Adrian was on the floor, unconscious but breathing. My knuckles were bloody, and my heart was hammering, but I felt more human than I ever had before. Jesus, Daniel, Layla breathed. She'd been watching from the doorway with the police. He'll live, I said. Unfortunately. Marcus was staring at me with something that might have been pride. You fought for yourself. I fought for the right to exist. There's a difference. The police took Adrian away in handcuffs. Attempted kidnapping, conspiracy, a dozen other charges that would keep him locked up for a very long time. But as I watched them drag him out of the house, I realized something important. I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. What happens now? I asked Marcus. He was sitting in one of the leather chairs, looking older and frielier than ever. Now you decide who you want to be. What do you mean? The company is yours. All of it. The research, the money, the responsibility. You can continue my work, or you can shut it all down. Your choice. I looked around the room, at the portraits of ancestors I'd never known, at the life I'd never lived. I don't want your company. Then what do you want? I thought about that for a long time. What did I want? I want to go home. This is your home. No. Home is a burned-out repair shop in Colorado. Home is Sunday barbecues and the smell of motor oil. Home is two people who love me even though they were paid to. Evelyn spoke for the first time since the fight. You're going back to America. I'm going back to Daniel Reeve. Because that's who I am. Not Elias Varick, not a genetic experiment, not an heir to a pharmaceutical empire. Just Daniel. But the money. Use it for the foundation. Help other kids who've been lost, stolen, abandoned. Give them what I never had, a choice about who they want to become. Marcus nodded slowly. The Reeve Foundation. Yeah. The Reeve Foundation. I walked to the window and looked out at the estate grounds, at the life I was walking away from. Will you visit? Evelyn asked. Will we see you again? Maybe. Someday. When I figure out who I really am. You're our son, she said. That's who you are. I'm a lot of people's son. George and Helen's. Yours and Marcus's. Hell, I'm the son of every scientist who designed my DNA. I turned back to face them. But for the first time in my life, I get to decide which one matters. 6 months later, I was back in Colorado, standing in the ruins of my father's workshop. The insurance money had finally come through, and I was rebuilding. Not exactly the way it was before, but something new. Something mine. The Reeve Foundation was already helping 12 kids. Children who'd been lost in the system, forgotten by bureaucracy, abandoned by families who couldn't care for them. We gave them what George and Helen had given me, a chance to belong somewhere. Marcus had died a month ago. Peacefully, Evelyn said. In his sleep. He'd left me everything in his will, but I'd signed it all over to the foundation. Except for one thing. The photograph from his desk. Marcus and George, standing together in 1987, before everything went wrong. I kept that. Because whatever else they were, whatever else they'd done, they were both my father in their own way. I was installing a new workbench when she found me. Daniel? I turned around. A young girl, maybe 16, standing in the doorway of the shop. She had the hollow eyes of someone who'd been abandoned too many times. Yeah. I'm Sarah. From the foundation. They said you might have work for me. I smiled and handed her a wrench. What do you know about fixing things? Nothing. But I'm willing to learn. Good. That's all anyone needs. As we worked together in the afternoon sunlight, rebuilding something that had been broken, I realized something important. It didn't matter how I'd been made. It didn't matter who'd paid for my childhood or why I'd been hidden or what genetic modifications I carried in my DNA. What mattered was what I chose to do with the life I'd been given. My name is Daniel Reeve. Or Elias Varick. Or maybe something else entirely. Either way, I am the son of two fathers, one who created me, and one who taught me how to create myself. $10,000 a month. That's what my childhood was worth on paper. But love has no receipt. Love can't be engineered or designed or bought. Love is just what happens when broken people decide to fix each other. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's enough to make you human. If this story touched your heart, like this video, share it, and comment where you're watching from. Because family isn't bought, it's built. One choice at a time. One day at a time. One broken thing made whole again. And that's a truth worth more than all the money in the world.